Hello and welcome to our Medical Pathways webinar. And we're delighted that you could join us this evening. My colleagues are just turning on their cameras as I speak. So my name is Helen Devine Costa. I'm the Vice Principal for Post 16. And leading our webinar tonight is Dr. Carol Song, who is our Medical Pathways leader. And Dr. Rachel Yu, who is our most competitive pathway advisor. So she helps students looking at competitive universities or particularly competitive pathways. And then Mr. Michael Hirsch, who is our higher education lead, and he leads the team with everything to do with all university applications. So there is a question and answer box down at the bottom of your screen. So if you want to pose any questions during the webinar, you're most welcome to do so. I'd advise you to wait a little bit though, because Carol will cover lots of information and it's a really well structured webinar. So it might well be that she's going to cover things that you've got in your head already. So perhaps just hang on a little bit and then start putting some questions in maybe after the first 10, 15 minutes or so. Rachel, myself, and Michael will be in the background answering those questions online. And if we think that there's any that would be good to cover at the end that are more kind of general questions, or if there's something that we're not too sure about, we'll wait for Carol to finish presenting and then we will answer those questions at the end of the webinar. But our aim this evening is for you to understand a little bit more about what it means to apply to a medical pathway. And I'm going to hand over to Carol, who is our expert. Thank you so much, Dr. Song.
Thank you, Misty C. So let me just share my screen first and bring up the slides. Just bear with me, please. So hopefully you can all see that. So first of all, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Hopefully we've got parents and students listening. So there is going to be a lot of information coming your way, as Mr. Wine Costa just said. But please don't worry about writing too many things down. We will PDF a copy of the slides and some useful links for you and send that out to you probably at the beginning of next week, so you can review that stuff for yourself. So please just, sit back, listen, take in our advice, take in our information, and have a good think about what lies ahead if this is something you're interested in. So covering a few key things today, some key questions that you should be asking yourselves for the students and asking your children for our parents and guardians. Some admission statistics from our recent cohorts at WIS here. So it's a super specific look at our particular students in this pathway. Some student profiles as well, our academic and super-curricular expectations, a little bit just briefly on the UCAT entrance test, which is probably most relevant for our year 12 students listening, a little bit our interviews and timelines, and hopefully a few minutes for Q&A at the end. So let's jump straight in because there's a lot to get through. Okay, so here are the key questions that are really important for you to really think about as you are thinking about embarking on this pathway. So really, do you have the academic profile to really flourish at university studying medicine, dentistry, or veterinary medicine? So we're not just saying to survive there, but to really flourish there. Secondly, do you really value your work-life balance at university and beyond? It's not to say that people on this pathway have no work-life balance, but it's certainly more challenging than perhaps in some other pathways that you may decide to choose. So what about the control over your time and where you work? Is that important to you? Again, you might have to cede some of that control if you do decide to go down this pathway. And for some of our students, this has come up previously, which is why I added this, is if you're in year 12 and not doing biology, why not? Or if you're currently in year 10 and year 11 and you really, really don't enjoy biology, then this is probably a moment to pause and ask yourself, well, is this really the right pathway? Because biology and definitely chemistry as well are really the core subjects that you need to be comfortable with and can excel in to succeed in this pathway. Lastly, really big question, are you truly willing to be responsible for someone's health, well-being, and at moments, probably their lives? So it really is a big question that you must ask yourself. If that is not something that you'd be willing to take on, well, then this is really important for you to establish that as soon as possible. So some of the feedback that we've had in our kind of HE process is that quite often when we ask students, why do they want to do this? They really, really struggle to articulate why they want to embark down this route. So this is something that you really need to interrogate yourselves with and really ask yourself this question. Okay, so Let's jump straight in. So we wanted to share a little bit about the recent cohort. We had quite a big cohort last year. This is really quite unusual. We usually expect about half this number would be a more appropriate number. So 18 students in all applied, and actually all of them received at least one offer from the UK or from HK. So the focus of our webinar is those two countries, as the vast majority of our students go there. And as you can see, 13 of our students embarked on medical school this autumn, whilst 5 unfortunately did not get into medical school despite having an offer. The main reason for that is that they did not achieve their IB offer grades. So on the left-hand side, just very quickly, you can see some of the offer universities, including a wide variety in the UK, both of the Hong Kong universities for medicine, also some schools in Scotland, in Ireland, and the students who didn't have their entry grades, hopefully you can see that they have all ended up in good universities as well. So they had good backup choices and good alternatives, which is always important for those of you on this pathway. So taking a little bit of a look at some more statistics and profiles. So these are final student kind of GCSEs for those 13 students that entered a medical school. These were, in fact, all medicine in the end. We didn't actually have any final dentistry or veterinary students last year. These were all medicine. So you can see, particularly that middle column, I want to draw your attention to. So GCSE students, you are aiming for last year students, there was not a single grade below an A star or a 9 for their science subjects. So biology, chemistry, and physics. You can see that every single one of them did triple science as well. And 3 of our students also did computer science, which is what the CS stands for. You can also see their final IB grades are, well, very high, hopefully you will agree. And if you look at the headline figures, our average IB grades were nearly 44, with the full score being 45, and the average HL grades for this cohort was 6.93. Effectively, that means almost everyone scoring 7s in almost every single one of their HL subjects. So I really think that this really should strike home with you to see that these are exceptionally academically strong students. GCSE grades for year 12, they're already locked in. That's not something you can change. And year 10 and year 11 students, this is what you're striving for if this is something that you would like to embark on. So hopefully we have kind of convinced you there that these students really are the most academic of our cohort and the most academic IB students in Hong Kong and actually worldwide. So just delving into maybe perhaps one student to get a little bit more detail. So this was a student who was successful in gaining all of their offers, both in the UK and in both of the universities of Hong Kong. She is now at COHK. So this is a student who is the top scoring biologist in the year, i.e. out of the 60-something students that did biology, she scored she was at the top when we ranked all of our students. She has very high, as you can see, subject scores and university predicted grades. So she went into her offer process with a full 45 and 7s in all of her HLs, which actually includes HLA maths. So a lot of very academic students with HLA maths. That's usually a sign that this is a student who is academically very strong. Her GCSEs, as you can see, are exceptionally good too, all grade 9s and A stars, including triple science. And her UCAT score, which is the entrance test for the UK, is 2,930. We'll talk a little bit about what those numbers mean, and situational judgment band of 2. Those are good scores. Not the highest scores that we would have, but very solid and very good scores. So the summary would be that this student has excellent GCSEs, excellent academic qualifications at IB as well, strong UCAT performance, and as you can see by being ranked the top biologist in the whole year, is academically at the very top of our year group. Okay, so a little bit more about the profile of the student. This is just a flavor of some of the super-curriculars. So super-curriculars are activities that are related to your chosen degree, but are well beyond the curriculum, designed to stretch you. So you can see that she's a UKBC Intermediate Year 12 Olympiad winner of a gold medal, putting her in the top 5% of students in the whole world. The UK MT Maths Challenge and the Silver Award there. She was a member of the PolyU Junior Researchers Programme and attended some masterclasses online at Cambridge as well. She's got good extensive work experience and voluntary work as well, some evidence of leadership and interest in caring through her service work for school and also beyond school. And other interests include music and her HKAYP. So you can see that this is a well-rounded student. This is not even all of her supercurricular activities. This is just a flavor of some of those things. But this is a fairly typical profile for a student who is a successful applicant for this pathway. So if we then just look at some statistics, I apologize for the busyness of some of these upcoming slides, but I just want to draw your attention to some of the numbers. So these are the international places available 23 to 24. The 24 to 25 data hasn't come out yet. That should be available later in the year. There's a link there if you wanted to check the latest, but usually these numbers don't change very much because these are capped quite tightly by the UK government. So the middle column highlighted in yellow there is what I want to draw your attention to. So you can see that for medical admissions in the UK, for those of you interested in the United Kingdom, apart from the University of Central Lancashire, which is very unusual, vast majority of other universities have very few spaces for international students. Most of our students probably will be applying as international students, so there's no guarantee of home fees just with a UK passport. So you can see that these large universities maybe only have 20 to 30 places maximum, perhaps even fewer, and this is obviously open to students across the whole globe, and you can see hopefully that it would be extremely competitive. To kind of delve a little bit further, this is for dental admissions, a very similar picture again. Many of these schools don't have any dental places for students outside of the UK, and again, only very small numbers for those international fee-paying students like ourselves. So just a few specific universities to look at as well, just again to give you a flavour of the competitiveness. So most of you probably will have heard of Imperial College, part of the University of London in the UK, ranked 4 out of 33 in this year's Complete University Guide UK for medicine, so very highly ranked. This is from the 2023 cycle. Again, we don't have the 24 admission just yet, so this is the most recent and verifiable information that I wanted to share with you. So the UK non-UK applicants, about 1,545 students applied that were non-UK. They are using UCAT for 2025 entry. This is a university that used to use BMAT, but now all the universities in the UK use UCAT, and they do what we call MMI interviews, which we'll briefly touch upon in a bit. So out of those applicants, you can see that nearly 100 applied from Hong Kong, but 9 people in Hong Kong received an offer. And if we think about just the academic sort of expectations of the students and parents in Hong Kong, 9 people in the whole of Hong Kong receiving an offer, that should show you how competitive this university and this degree is. So again, let's look at a university, a medical school ranked slightly more kind of mid-table. So this is Sheffield in the Midlands in the UK, and ranked number 17 out of 33 this year. Fewer international applicants because it's not as popular and perhaps not as famous as Imperial. So 310. They shared their UCAT score with us and with the public, and their lowest UCAT score for interview for international students was 2,870. That's a pretty high score. So they again do these UCAT admissions and MMI interviews. So out of those 300 applicants, they interviewed about a third of those, about 100 of those. And then of those, they made 35 offers. And in the end, 18 students enrolled as international students, and 4 of those students came from Hong Kong. So again, pretty small numbers indicating again how competitive it is. So just to make sure that we don't just talk about medicine, a little bit from dentistry. This is Dundee, ranked first out of all dental schools in the United Kingdom with 100 applicants. Their average UCAT score for dentistry is a little bit lower than for medicine, but similar in terms of it's the same written test, similar format of MMI interviews, but of course focused on dentistry rather than medicine. Fewer international applicants to this university. And in the end, they interviewed 39, made 30 offers and enrolled 7. So again, the numbers are pretty small, but perhaps a little less competitive than what we saw for medicine. So wanted to kind of go through the key components of applications if you're thinking about this pathway. This is a starting point for you to think about. So if you're in year 10 and year 11, these are the things that you should be starting to do. If you're in year 12, you should be well on your way already. So our components are the academic aspect, so the excellent GCSE and excellent predicted IB grades, as we covered earlier, work experience in terms of clinical work experience, laboratory-based work experience, and also volunteering. We need some super-curriculars that are strong, ideally competitive ones, such as competitions, things where you have to apply and be nominated for, are also quite helpful. And of course, if you are applying for the UK for dentistry and for medicine, you will need to sit the UCAT entrance test in the year of your application as well. Just listing here are some of the attributes of students. This is not comprehensive, but some of these all of these we would expect to see, but there are other things that would be helpful too. I've listed communicator being number one on the list. Of course, you have to have the knowledge, you have to be capable in terms of your skills, but actually so much of these jobs dealing with patients, dealing with families at a time of crisis really comes down to communication with your patients, with their family members, and with your colleagues. So is one that we do prioritize quite heavily in the pathway. So let's go through some of the different application requirements. This is just a very quick brief overview, and then we'll delve into some of the key bits a little bit later on. So having a look for medicine, veterinary medicine, and dentistry, you can see that there are lots in common. All three of these pathways require a personal statement. There will be different lengths depending on UK or HK. Medicine and dentistry require UCAT tests. Veterinary medicine, there may be very specific universities that may require an element of a written test, so you must make sure you do your research. All three of these universities will do, these pathways will do interviews in the vast majority of cases in order to make sure that they're assessing students for those attributes that we touched upon earlier. So the UK, I would say, generally speaking, this is obviously a broad generalization, the UK is quite holistic in terms of they want academic scores to be great, but they also really look for those key attributes of confidence, communication, those skills of kind of those softer attributes and those kind of key ATL skills that we help our students to build. For the UK, if you're applying for these pathways, you're only allowed to put 4 universities down for these degrees. You must have one that is a non-medical pathway degree. So that's just to ensure that students have a backup. And this again reflects the competitiveness of the pathway. Even UCAS want you to have a backup, not just us. So for HK, I would say, the kind of the primary requirement that they're looking for, of course, they want students with those skills as well, but really the most, the highest barrier probably is the IB grades. The offers from HK universities are generally 42 plus for dentistry, somewhere in the region of 40, 41, 42 for veterinary at CityU, and then for medicine, unfortunately, it's 43 to 44 were the offers that we've been receiving in the last few years. So really not very much leeway at all in terms of your IB grades. And of course, they'll be looking at your GCSE grades as well. So let's delve into some of these points a little bit more. As I said before, we're looking at very high IB grades for across all of these subjects. Now, I just want to bring your attention to the UCAS points over here. May look quite low. 36 to 39 is the offer, and that may kind of go, oh, that's not too bad. Well, that's true. It's not as bad as 33, 34. However, the points average of the students actually entering medical school who are successful are not going to be 36, 30 to 39. They're going to be 42, probably at least 40 plus, if not 41, 42 and higher. So what that number says is that they want you to be academically strong enough, but actually the successful applicants are usually very strong in academic, but they are also looking at quite challenging interviews in terms of those MMIs, which we'll discuss. So a couple of things to note on the Hong Kong side, they will want some specific HL point scores, usually very, very high. They may ask for some specific GCSE grades. And just a note for HKU, you will be asked questions in Cantonese to test your proficiency. That does not happen at CUHK, but it happens at HKU. On the UK side, for UCAS, you will have to take a written test for dentistry and for medicine, and you will have to undergo some challenging interviews, either panel or what we call the MMI. So there is a lot more emphasis and weight placed on the interview in the UK. Just a quick note for some of you for the UK, you must make sure that you look at your specific chosen universities carefully, because some universities will ask for very specific subjects at specific grades, and including some universities ask for HL maths. So you need to be very careful in researching exactly what the requirements are. So for those of you in year 11 and also in year 10, choosing your IB scores, choosing your IB subjects, that's important to be aware of going into your year 12. But year 12, it's a little bit late for you, so you have to work around the subjects that you are currently taking. Okay, but they will include some kind of combination of biology, chemistry, and sometimes maths as well. Okay, so let's take a look at each of those 4 dimensions individually. So academics first. I hope I've emphasized this quite a lot already. So really, IGCSEs, we should be looking at 8, if not all 9s, and A's and A stars. Most of our students will take triple science who are going down this pathway because they're very committed to their scientific studies. You will be required to have specific English and mathematical grades as well. So you must make sure you check each individual requirement. In terms of IBs, well, chemistry is a must at the vast majority, if not all of the universities. HR biology, you should ideally be taking too. Those 2 subjects are probably the most closely aligned with the academic content of a medical degree. As I said, HR maths is sometimes required, so you must be particular with your research to ensure that you're not missing any key information there, because it would be a real waste to use one of your 4 places in the UK, for example, on a degree where HR maths is required and you simply don't have that. You will be discarded in the first round of admissions reviews. So specific requirements, some schools will ask for very specific HR requirements. So again, you must make sure you check these individual requirements. I can't emphasize that enough. There's no way we can cover all the permutations and all the combinations for each individual here. So really, judicious research is a must for everyone thinking about this pathway. Moving on from the academics, from just the grades, I think these are some of the questions that perhaps our year 12 students should really be asking themselves. And then this is, further on down the line for the year 10s and year 12s, the year 10s and year 11s. So really the big question is this the right pathway? Are you sitting there with current predicted grades or predicted grades later this term of 6s and 7s? If you don't do biology or you don't enjoy biology, ask yourself why, and ask yourself, is this really the best path to go down? If you're applying for Hong Kong, really we need to be seeing your UAGs and your predicted grades being at 43, particularly your HL subjects should be 7s and minimum a 6 perhaps in there. By the term 1 of year 13, we will lock your UAGs and you will be applying with those. If you're going down this pathway, your applications are a few months earlier than your peers who are not applying for medicine and not applying for the most competitive pathways, such as Cambridge and Oxford. So you will have to be a couple of months ahead of the game, but that is the least that we expect from the students embarking on this journey. So my big question to all of you listening is, can I thrive at medical, dental, veterinary school and become a successful doctor, dentist, vet, etc.? If I cannot ace my GCSEs and ace my IB sciences, academically speaking, those are probably the best indicators for whether you currently or whether you will be able to thrive on this pathway. Okay, so that's a really key question to keep in mind and have a really honest kind of discussion with your family and an honest think and reflect for yourself as well. Okay, so work experience. This is sometimes very challenging. We do acknowledge that. The universities acknowledge that as well. So they're very happy to accept a range of different types of experience. So we usually, our successful applicants do have experience in outpatient clinics. Many of them, most of them, I would say, would have some hospital-based clinical experience, observing ward round surgeries in hospital clinics as well. Lots of our students also like to gain some laboratory experience because part of the job of a doctor is also to research as well. So some lab experience is always excellent. A word of warning to the vets, lots of universities have very, very specific minimum requirements, and these are often very extensive. So you have to start building that experience and logging your hours in animal charities, on farms, with different types of animals as early as you can, because the universities will have specific requirements for your work experience, much more so than medicine. medicine and dentistry. So our advice is really to make sure that all of your work experience is complete by the summer between year 12 and year 13 at the very latest. If you can get some things done during year 11, year 12, that's probably great. I think year 10 is a little bit early, but certainly during year 11, the latter part of year 11 into year 12, that should be an ideal time to think about that. And all done and dusted by the end of year 12, please, because you're going to be too busy academically with applications and with your academic work at the beginning of year 13. Volunteering. So I think the buzz phrase here really is long-term commitment to caring. These are pathways and professions which look for people who are really committed to caring for animals and for other humans. So these could be anything to do with, for example, it could be volunteering work in nursing homes. It could be volunteering work in a local school. It could be teaching younger students. It could be putting on opportunities for enrichment for older members of the community at a local social center, etc. Helping differently abled individuals, anything that puts you in a position where you're building those empathetic relationships and those communication skills with people whom you don't normally talk to on a day-to-day basis, and maybe you don't have contact with on a day-to-day basis. It's always a good idea to ask for reference letters and any certificates to make sure that you have proof and demonstration that you have done those things. Okay, so the more variety you can have in volunteering, the better. The long-term part is important, and we're not looking for perhaps 1 or 2 sessions with Feeding Hong Kong, and that's it. That's really not enough to really understand the challenges facing lots of different people. So the sooner that you can start with your volunteering, the better. Not only is it a requirement for applications, but actually, perhaps more importantly, it puts you in a position to assess whether this is something that you're suitable for. Do you feel comfortable in those situations? Are you able to thrive in those situations? Are you able to, like I said, build those relationships and communicate with confidence with all of those different stakeholders that are involved? So this is something to really think about. And if you're in year 12, this should be well on your way. We do have some CAS activities that do align well with these. So look out for those service opportunities in school. But most of our students will do more than just what's in school. They will do some extensive volunteering outside of school as well. As you can probably see, most of the students going down this pathway are proactive and go-getting. So they seek these opportunities out and commit to them and are able to have these run alongside their academics and balance both. Okay, looking a little bit ahead to super-curricular. So this is not volunteering. This is more the academic aspect. So these are more self-directed learnings outside of school, but it could be also inside school. But what we mean is it's beyond the curriculum. So it's not directly related to your biology curriculum at IB, for example. So for example, these things could be a whole variety of things. It could be things like academic competitions. We will run the biology Olympiad for year 12s as in the summer of your year 12 year. You should be regularly reading scientific journals, magazines, newspapers, looking at healthcare related news in the UK and Hong Kong, because these are the countries that you're interested in becoming a medical professional in. So it doesn't have to be very, very fancy. It can be some reading, it can be podcasts, it can be online courses, in-person courses. We have some suggestions on the super-curricular website and on the careers website on the super-curricular area. And we also, Dr. Yu and I, have some super-curricular reading related to chemistry and biology that would be very suitable in our laboratories as well. The key thing here is not necessarily the impressiveness of the experience, although 1 or 2 of those never hurts. Really, the admissions panel is looking for interest and reflection. So what is it that the student learned from reading this book, or what is it they learned on the course that they attended or at a lecture that they listened to? The reflection and the depth and the quality of the reflection, that's what they're really looking for, rather than just, a list of a million things that they've done without any real kind of depth and insight into what they gained from that experience. So On that supercurricular term, we have a discussion group for people who are interested in the pathway. When I say interested, I mean very serious applicants, so students with suitable supercurriculars, students with suitable academic backgrounds as well. This runs in year 12, starting in term 3 of year 12 and into term 1 of year 13. We run it on Thursdays after school. It's led by myself. The students will be presenting in a series of different styles, so grand round clinical presentations, to get them into the mindset of medicine. We also do journal clubs, which is quite challenging in terms of reading real research articles and having to present those back, look at the statistics, look at how generalizable it is to populations, etc. And also on some healthcare topics or hot issues that are currently in the being discussed in the UK and in Hong Kong. So this is we expect full participation and full commitment on a weekly basis for our year 12 and 13 students who are serious about this pathway. And in term 1 of year 13, so around about this time, actually, we turn our attention over to interview prep, and including running some mock interviews for our UK candidates for the MMIs as well. To quote one of our students from a few years ago, it's like taking an extra SLIB subject because you have to prepare for the presentations and you have to really fully participate. So it's not just to come along and passively sit there and listen. This is really an opportunity to stretch yourself, but it is also an opportunity to add more stress, because if you're already finding it very hard to cope with the DP program, it is extremely challenging. Then adding this on top of it really can be detrimental to your well-being and your mental health. So this is why we really want students to think carefully about their decisions, and families to make sure that they're reflecting with their students about these decisions, because the IBDP is hard enough. This is like adding an extra subject and an extra layer on top of that to ensure that serious candidates can have a decent chance of success. Okay, so on to the final aspect here, which is entrance exams. So these are done in the UK, mainly for medicine and for dentistry. The only remaining test, actually, I beg your pardon, there's a little typo on the left-hand side there. It's actually the UCAT is the only one now available. The BMAT is no longer running. So the UCAT is a competency kind of based test, but it's actually more of a skills-based test with an element of situational judgment in it. So the students are expected to prepare for this independently because we simply don't have the capacity in school to kind of do this. But also, it's actually a really good test for the students. If they can independently prepare for this and score well, it's a good kind of tick in your column to say that, yeah, actually, this is maybe something this is a pathway that I could be embarking on. If you unfortunately can't prepare for it independently very well and score rather highly, then perhaps this is another pause point to just say, okay, perhaps this is something that I should be rethinking. So the UCAT is taken in the July to September of the year that you will apply. So for our current students, they will have taken it just before they embarked on year 13. So for you guys, it will be for year 12, it will be this time, just before this time next year. So over the summer between year 12 and year 13. So what's great about the UCAT is that you will have your results before you have you have to make your application. That is a real advantage, because then you can make some decisions based on that. That wasn't the case with the previous test, the BMAT, but it is the case with UCAT. So it's good that you will have your UCAT score before you have to commit to the October deadline of applying for the UK medical schools. Just to reiterate, currently there isn't a written exam for Hong Kong, and there hasn't been, at least since the last 6-7 years that we've been doing this. So this currently really only applies for the UK. So this is taken in the summer before you start your year 13, and it's only valid for that year. So there's no point in trying it early for practice or anything like that. You prepare for it and you sit it properly. You do it the once in the summer before you hit year 13. So just to have a little look at the UCAT score. So the full score of the UCAT is 3,600. That's an extremely high score. This is the initial testing grades from 2024. The cohort that have just finished. So you can see that really the breakdown is not so important for you guys. You can see that this score on the right-hand side is what you should be paying attention for. The average is usually around 2,500, but I would consider 2,500 a non-competitive and quite a low score. So many of those students taking that UCAT will then not go on and apply for medical school. For us, I think a competitive score of 2,800 plus is necessary, and that puts the students in the 80th percentile, i.e., with only 20% of people above them. So the 2,800 plus for us is a competitive UCAT score from our experience of the last few years. So the situational judgment, so this is an area that our students do struggle with. You can see that Band 1 is the highest, by the way, and Band 2 is the second highest. Band 1 and Band 2 are the ideal scores. If you score Band 4, that is disqualifying for a lot of universities. They will not accept your application. Band 3 is quite borderline. Many universities, although may not straight out say that they will not accept students with Band 3, having Band 3 may put you lower on their kind of list for interviews and for offers. So what we're essentially saying is, as with all other aspects of the application process, you really do need to be scoring rather highly, which is 2,800 plus. Many of our students that are successful score in excess of 3,000 actually, which is very, very high. And I think particularly for international students, we're swimming in a even more competitive pool. So that's why the scores that are for UCAT are so high. So 2,800, 900 or 3,000 plus is ideal, and Band 1 or 2 are the grades that we need. Any lower than that, that should be a moment to rethink this pathway. And at the very, very least, it will mean that you need to do a lot more in-depth research, to look at universities, the few universities for whom maybe the UCAT will not be as weighted as strongly. So decisions will be made based on that. Okay, so interview-wise, this is something that makes a lot of our students understandably nervous. It is really, really challenging. So for Hong Kong, their interviews are as follows. HKU in medicine do an MMI style. I think this is also the case for dentistry. Well, it's not really a proper MMI, and I'll explain why. But it's also quite similar for veterinary and for dentistry as well at CityU and at HKU for dentistry. So actually, the MMI, they have sort of what they refer to as different stations. But it really isn't an MMI in the true sense, in the UK sense. So this is usually sort of divided into two parts. This is what it's been in the last few years, but again, this can evolve. So we do need to make sure we stay on top of our information. But currently, the HKU interview will include a group interview. Previously, it's been in groups of 4. They will have an individual interview as well. And as I said before, your Cantonese proficiency is tested. So you will be asked questions in Cantonese, as well as mostly in English. The CUHK is more of a traditional panel interview with 2 interviewers, and here they really delve into your motivations, your skills, interesting things you've included on your CV, and your super-curriculars, etc. In past years as well, they have thrown in an extra element, sometimes of an image interpretation. So again, this is dynamic, it can change year on year, so there may be some surprises. So if we look at the UK interview process, the MMI that I've been referring to is a multiple mini interview. So these are a series of short stations, maybe something like 8 to 10 stations, each station being maybe 6 to 10 minutes long, depending on the station. And these are really, really challenging. We run mock interviews, and I think the other panelists and teachers who help out with that would agree that a lot of adults who are very successful professionally would struggle to go through this interview process successfully. So the students have to change very quickly from one station to the next in terms of what kind of skills that they're displaying and they're using. So these mini interview stations will include role plays with actors who may be angry, who may be shouting, who may be asking for information in really tough terms. They might include interpretation of images. It might include mathematical and data analysis. Almost always in the UK, it will include an element of ethics and professional judgment. And they'll also ask you about your knowledge of the NHS, since you're asking to join such a well-beloved kind of institution in the United Kingdom. So it is extremely challenging. I don't say that lightly. I think a lot of people would struggle with this. And for students when they're 16, 17 years old with very little, or 17, 18 years old with very little interview experience, this is most certainly a challenging process to go through. Some other universities will use panel interviews with anywhere between 2 to up to 5 interviewers, and they'll again ask rather similar questions in terms of seeking out an understanding of why you want to join a medical profession, what skills you have tried to build, what your strengths, weaknesses are, etc. In particular universities, for example, Oxford and Cambridge, they will do a highly academic interview as well. So if students are interested in that pathway, which is hyper competitive, then not only are they preparing for the normal ethical questions and work experience skill-based questions, NHS questions, they have the added pressure of having to do a academic interview designed to stretch them well beyond anything that they've learned before, and designed to really look at their externalized thinking. So this really should be the absolute minority of students every year. It is extremely challenging, and this is my 7th year at West Island, and we've only ever got one student into Oxford for medicine. It's just extremely challenging otherwise. Okay, so in terms of what you need to kind of be thinking about when you're choosing a university, of course there are many other things, but maybe these are just some of the things that you might want to have in the forefront of your mind. So how do they select for their candidates, right? Quite often for medicine, unfortunately, it is wherever you can get in rather than the absolute perfect ideal university, just because of the competitive nature. You have to perhaps not only chase those extremely shiny big name universities. Of course, they're great, but that's not realistic for the vast majority of people. Look at how they weight their candidate selection. So what about if you have a low UCAT score, then you need to look for universities that don't put so much emphasis on that. How much do they weight their IB grades, predicted grades, and IGCSE grades, which are already available at the time of your application? Most universities will give pretty strong weighting to their interview performance as well. Look at the style of the course. Not all medical degrees are the same. They have different styles of teaching. They have different options in terms of an intercalated year, so a 6th year where you can do different degrees. Some universities you must do an intercalated year. That's not even a choice. So if that is something that you're not interested in, then you need to make sure that you are searching for that information. Of course, you want to be in a country or in a city or a location that you want to spend 5 to 6 years of your life in, right? This is a significant chunk of your life. So you must make sure that you make this choice with all the information to hand. It's also a good consideration to think about where do you want to work after you qualify. If you're very much set on working in Hong Kong, then there are probably some really good reasons for why you would actually just go to university here. Of course, there are lists of universities in the UK where Hong Kong will accept those degrees with a less rigorous kind of exam and qualification process in Hong Kong for transfer. So again, you must think about those things if you can in advance. Think about, does this university seem like the right fit for me, right? So of course, there's an element of, competitiveness in terms of where can I get in. But if you're going to be spending 5 to 6 years of your life there and have a productive time there, then do think about some of the extra things around beyond just the degree itself. A few things to note that there are some universities that actually have age restrictions, so you must be careful. Some universities say you must be 18 when you matriculate into the university, so you must be aged 18 and above to start medicine. So some of our students are quite young for their year, and they're often 17 when they begin their university course, and therefore they cannot attend those universities that say you must be 18 and above. Of course, this is a thing perhaps for the parents and the guardians listening. The cost of international students' fees, probably don't need to tell you that, are very, very high. Particularly for clinical school, it can be as high as 50,000 to up to 60,000 a year. So the Imperial, that's based in London, their international school fees for a clinical school is £50,400 a year. So you are looking at a significant cost just to do the fees pathways. And of course, there are many additional costs, including living costs, including accommodation, etc., travel, etc. And there are some hidden costs as well. A few of our alumni did bring up to us that they were quite surprised that, especially when they hit clinical year, so year 3, year 4, year 5, or the last 3 years, year 4, year 5, year 6, if you're doing a 6-year course, those years are often based away from your main university, and you may, as an international student, you will have to pay for extra accommodation away from your main accommodation and extra travel costs. That's covered for home students, but that isn't covered for many of the international students. So it's just to be aware that there will be a significant cost upfront, hidden and upfront in the UK if you elect to study medicine there as an international fee-paying student. Just to mention these, although this is not the focus of the Pathways program, I think it's important for our students and our parents listening to be aware. There are other pathways into medicine, but we don't really have very many students going down those pathways. So, for example, other countries such as Malta, the Czech Republic, we do often have students applying for Ireland. That's a little bit more in line with the UK. So, so that is something a little bit more common. There is graduate entry medicine in the UK, but again, that's extremely competitive, perhaps even more competitive than undergraduate. And there is also the opportunity for integration, i.e. to study biomedicine or biological sciences, and then through that course, then enter medical school with at the same location. So that is offered in a few UK universities. HKU does have an integration pathway for a small number of students doing their biomedicine pathway. So that is also an alternative to think about as well. There are many, many other related degrees, so science degrees that are related to medicine, and also allied health professional degrees as well. So, you know, the healthcare of patients and for animals and veterinary and for dentists as well. You work in multidisciplinary teams. The doctor is simply a member of the team, perhaps maybe one of the more high profile members, but all of the other allied health professionals are equally important in making sure that the patient journey is successful. So if medicine, perhaps the academic side of things is not doesn't align well with your academic profile, these are some professions to consider. And also, you're never going to go wrong if you go to a great university and study a science degree. You're going to be eminently employable in a lot of professions with that science degree from a good university. So it's just to really emphasize that this is not the be all and end all. Students can have a lot of success, can make contributions to society, and can have a happy, thriving university life and beyond, even if they don't apply for medicine and get in. Okay, so at the very end here, I just wanted to share sort of a little rough pathway with all of you so that we have some time for questions as well. So if you're currently in year 10 and year 11, you should be thinking about your volunteering activities. You should be starting to participate in some super-curricular reading, some courses, some podcast listenings, watching documentaries, things that you can kind of do to start to delve into whether this is an area that you're really, really interested in, and to start to kind of accumulate that evidence that you are a committed student from long term. Of course, year 11, particularly, you're coming up to choosing your IB option courses. And so you must think carefully about that and make the best decisions for the pathway if this is something that you're very serious about. Okay. In year 12, term 1, as I said, we're aiming for high grades from the very beginning of year 12. Of course, your super-curricular activities and volunteering should be reaching a peak during year 12. And making sure that you're getting your clinical work experience, etc. Maintaining those academic grades and those supercurricular activities into term 2. By the end of term 3 in year 12, you're looking at the business end of year 12 and the application process. So you're starting to think about your university application grades. You'll be joining discussion group in term 3. Your CAS should all be completed. Your volunteering should ideally be wrapping up towards the latter part of year 12 and certainly completed over the summer. You will be doing your final decisions about the pathway then. You'll You'll be doing your UCAT written test if you're applying for the UK in Dentistry and Medicine before the beginning of year 13, so the summer between year 12 and 13, so that when you start year 13, you're ready for the intense academic pressure of the final part of the DP program. Your applications are submitted in mid-October for the UK, but we ask for them to be ready a little bit in advance so that the school can finish all the aspects that we're responsible for. So your applications are early in year 13, around about November time for Hong Kong, because we always go for the early applications for the Hong Kong process. We then are diving into interview prep around about now. So term 1 of year 13, and then interviews start in December and go all the way through to term 1 whilst you're trying to do your mocks as well. So it is an extremely busy time and a time of high stress for our students. Hopefully by term 2 and 3, we start to get some offers. Your final exams are in May of your year 13, and by July the 5th, you will know whether you have a place at medical school or not. So that's a kind of little overview timeline for where we should be or what we should be considering along the pathway. Okay, so the key messages, I know I've given you a lot of information, so thank you for bearing with me. The key take-home messages are it's extremely competitive. We need students who are academically at the very, very, very top end of the cohort and in Hong Kong and indeed in the whole world if you're applying internationally. We have that requirement of those 9s at GCSE, not an actual requirement in terms of you must have it, but those are the profiles of the students who are successful. So those are the students that we think stand a serious chance. UAGs of 43 plus, so predicted grades in IBs of 43 plus for Hong Kong, particularly for Hong Kong, but actually most of our students going for the UK have those kinds of UAGs as well. You need to be realistic. I know it's not a popular thing to say, but sometimes it's about timing. It's not to say that you're never ever going to be a doctor if that's something that you really want to aspire to. But for some of our students, perhaps academically and temperamentally, they haven't reached that maturity yet to be able to hit these kinds of academic heights and hit these kinds of grades by the time that they're in year 12 and going into the beginning of year 13. That's not to say that this pathway is completely closed, but it may be that you have to take a different pathway or a slightly longer route into the profession. But unfortunately, as it stands, we live in the world as it is, not as it should be, but it is competitive. So you must be realistic and you must have good backup choices. What we don't want is students to end up with poor options because they put all their eggs into this medical pathway basket. It requires full commitment. You can see it requires full commitment from an academic point of view, from super-curricular, volunteering, work experience. It's students have to have the full holistic package. And as you can see from the information provided today, there are lots of nuances, lots of differences. So detailed research on an individual basis for your particular scenario and situation is really important. Most students who want to go down this pathway are extremely proactive, are extremely organized. So this should not be a big ask at all. If you can't do this, then certainly I would not want you to be caring for my loved ones as their medical professional. So this is like a to-do list, but only for the year 12s. Really, I think year 10s and year 11s, perhaps this is something that can wait for you guys. If you're in year 12 already, you really should be seriously asking if this is the right pathway. You should be starting to, as you go through year 12, think about those predicted grades that you're going to be getting, your transcript grades in the initial period, and then UAGs towards the end of year 12. You should be signing up for UCAT alerts. There's no need to start prepping that for now. Most students will start their prep in term 3 and really hit the peak of their prep during that summer between 12 and 13, and then take that test in late August, in early to mid-August before you begin year 13, so that you can hit year 13 with all of that out of the way so that you can concentrate on interview prep and your academics. A big piece of advice from many of our previous alumni is to make sure you have all your CAS portfolio and your CAS requirements completed in year 12 so that you can really turn your full attention over to your academics and your commitment to this pathway by the time you hit year 13. That's a big tip from us and from our previous alumni. So I think that's the end of what I wanted to say. I just wonder if there are any questions coming from the chat that we could address. If it's a very particular question, I might not know the answer, but I can try and find out and direct you towards the right answer. Any questions, Misty C?
Um, no, I think Rachel and Michael have answered all of the questions in the background. I can see they've done a great job. Thank you. Or Michael, do you want to jump on?
Yeah, just a second if I can get. Yeah, I wanted to share just sort of one thought. Obviously, Dr. Song's presentation was really comprehensive and there's excellent information, and she's done a really good job, I think, compiling all of the data and statistics for us to see, what's required for successful applications with this. One of the things that I'm a little bit concerned about is that we can see these amazing things that these students have accomplished, and we can sort of see this as a Mount Everest that inspires us to want to climb it. And I think we need to be a little bit careful, particularly in terms of course combinations. For some of our students, their background in science is not where it needs to be, and they may end up doing HL Bio and HL Chemistry because they just want to have a chance to go for medicine. And from an educational standpoint, I really like that. But from a practical university application standpoint, it creates problems. And so I think particularly that higher level chemistry course, but both the higher level chemistry and biology course, when they're taken in conjunction, it's a huge amount of work. And we do have a handful of students every year who will go down this pathway for too long. And so what will end up happening is maybe they wait and they are so far into the program that they can't change their options. And as a result of that, they might be getting a 3 in higher level chemistry, hoping to turn that into a 7. And we're in October or November of year 12. And that's just not something that we're going to see happen with all of the pressures. And then as a consequence of that, the courses in the universities that they're eligible for a university get significantly impacted by that. And so if that student is working with their tutor, if they're working with people like Dr. Song and Dr. Yu and their counselor and saying, I'm doing my best, I have a tutor, I can just pull a 4 in chemistry, we might say, well, let's have chemistry go down to standard level and let's have a deeper conversation about what science-related careers that you can be interested in, where you're helping people and you're using science. Because if we get into application time and we need to apply to university and you've got a 3 at higher level chemistry, it closes a ton of doors. Because even non-science related courses, a lot of times they will say something like 665 at HL. And so if one of your 3 HL courses has nothing to do with what you're studying, but it's a lower grade like a 3 or a 4, it can have major negative implications. So I think it's really inspiring to see what kids can do. It's exciting to sort of see that mountain, but I really want families and students to work in conjunction with the people who are really going to try to give them the best guidance about maximizing and optimizing their opportunities for university progression. I don't know if Carol wanted to piggyback on that or not.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. That's, I think, one of the biggest frustrations for us, because obviously we want our students to leave university with lots of options. That's what we want. Many options and many doors open for them to walk through. And I would reiterate exactly what Mr. Hirsch has just said there. And we always have every year a handful of students sitting on 3s and 4s in biology, hoping that that's going to biology and chemistry, hoping that's going to suddenly change to a 7. Dr. Yu and I both teach HR classes. That just doesn't happen. That's why I wanted to show you those GCSE grades. It is not a coincidence that every single one of those successful students scored triple 9s in GCSE, biology, chemistry, and physics, with the addition of an A-star in computer science for a few of them as well. These are students who breeze through GCSEs. I'm not saying GCSEs are a breeze, but once you've started to experience IBs, GCSEs do not seem that challenging. So really a good indicator is if you are hitting those 8s and 9s at GCSE across the science sciences, in fact, across all of your subjects. What we don't want to happen is students be at the end of year 12 on 3s and 4s in biology and chemistry on 2 of their HLs. And as Mr. Hirsch says, that leaves you with very limited options for your university applications, even for non-science degrees, which is not what we want. I know I can sometimes come across as, I don't want to be breaking people's dreams. That's not what we're here to do. We want you to make the best informed decisions that you can, and to walk out of school with lots of options. We're not here to tell you absolutely cannot do something, but we live in a world of reality. We want you to make informed decisions, and please listen to our guidance. We're not here to be mean about it. It really is our experience and what we have seen in many years. Is there any other questions, or are we all done?
Just one last one. It just says, is there any minimum work experience requirement?
For veterinary, yes, for a lot of universities, as I said. For medicine, no. But again, I think it would be a major red flag if you didn't have work experience. It is extremely challenging to gain work experience. So you have to look across in different countries. Sometimes you have to send out 20, 30 emails to different clinics in order to seek opportunities. In Hong Kong, there isn't really a system set up for schools to kind of liaise with hospitals and do that. So really, it is a self-driven thing. So you have to use all of your contacts and you have to cold email, cold call clinics, and you may send out 30 emails and get 0 responses. But that is something that you have to persist in. But we also look for variety as well. So clinical work experience in terms of shadowing doctors, vets, dentists, but also laboratory-based work experience is good too.
I think also that's a really good sort of litmus test. I think Dr. Song was talking about that idea that if you're really, really, really working hard and you're struggling to get 8s at IGCSE, the DP is a step up from that. And from the DP to medicine, that's another step up. And so, you're going to go from being one of the best science students in your whole entire school, full of good science students, and then you're going to be pretty normal, probably. You may even be below average when you get to medicine. So, the idea of, I have to do all of this stuff for IB, and then on top of that, I have to do all of this volunteer work and job shadowing and all of that. Yeah, that's what is required, but also the students who are successful, they're able to manage that. They have the executive function skills to not have their parents book that stuff for them, but to find it themselves, to be able to have the adult phone calls and emails to sort of set that up and sort it out. To be able to manage their calendar, to do those commitments outside of school while performing well in school. And if a student is so overwhelmed by their IB that they don't have time in their life to be volunteering in terms of these types of things outside of school, then they're not going to be able to survive medical school anyways.
Thank you. Just, Rachel, are you answering that last question there? Yeah. Okay, so I think that's it. Dr. Yu's just answering one last question in the background. But thank you so much for everybody for attending. Huge thank you to Dr. Song. We've already had some comments saying how comprehensive it is, and thank you so much for the presentation, Carol. And big thank you as well to Rachel and Michael for working away in the background there, answering lots of questions through the evening. So thank you so much. If you do have any other questions, I know you can reach out to anybody that's on this call, and we will do our best to help you. And I think the message really is to, do your research and talk to people and listen to the advice that you're getting from your teachers and from the HE team that know your strengths and your challenges. And then you will make informed decisions. So huge thank you to everybody. Have a good rest of the evening, and we'll see everybody at school tomorrow.